She was 78, fragile as winter porcelain, her memory fading like snow melting on glass. In the small mountain town of Willow Creek, Vermont, neighbors often saw Evelyn Hartman, the widow who once owned half the valley's timber yards, sitting by the window, humming to ghosts only she could hear. Beside her was always Melissa, her elegant daughter-in-law, whose smile was as polished as it was
Please,
poisonous.
what do you want?
On the night the blizzard came, that
Just
smile
stay still.
disappeared.
It will
And
all
so
be
did
over
Evelyn.
soon.
By dawn, her car was found abandoned near Frost Hollow, its headlights still burning through the storm. But the old woman was gone, left somewhere in the endless white. Everyone said she must have wandered off and frozen. Everyone, except one man and his German shepherd, Shadow, who caught a scent beneath the snow and followed it straight into a truth darker than the storm itself. What they found that night will break your heart and restore your faith in miracles that still walk on full paws.
It's okay, ma'am. I'm here to
Before
help
we
you.
begin, tell me where you're watching from.
Thank you, officer.
Drop your city in the
My
comments,
dog kept me
and let's
warm.
see how far this story of betrayal, mercy, and redemption can travel tonight. Snow had begun its slow descent over Willow Creek, Vermont, a hush of white swallowing the sound of the world. The town lay cupped between pine-clad hills and a frozen river that wound like glass through the valley. Lights from the scattered houses flickered faintly beneath the gathering dusk, tiny promises of warmth against the oncoming storm. On the highest ridge, overlooking it all, stood the Hartman estate, a grand timber-framed house built when men still carved their names into the wood they felled. Its dark roof was heavy with snow, and its windows, though bright, felt like eyes that had long since stopped blinking. Inside, the house smelled faintly of pine and old paper, of the kind of history that creaked when you walked across it. Evelyn Hartman, 78, sat by the fireplace, her frail hands folded neatly in her lap. Her white hair, once a proud silver cascade, now framed her face like a halo of fog. The firelight touched her features gently, revealing lines etched not only by age, but by the weight of remembrance and forgetting. She wore a cream cardigan button wrong at the collar, a small mistake she no longer noticed. On her wrist hung a thin gold bracelet, engraved with the initials E.H. and the year 1965, the year she married the man who built this empire from the forest. Her eyes, pale blue and distant, stared at the flames as if searching for something she'd misplaced within them. Every few minutes she would murmur a name. "William, are you coming in from the cold?" Though her husband had been gone for 15 winters now. On the coffee table before her sat a cup of tea gone cold and a stack of legal documents thick as her trembling memory. The soft click of heels echoed across the wooden floor. Melissa Hartman, 36, moved with a grace that felt rehearsed. She was beautiful in the way porcelain can be, perfect, polished, and cold to the touch. Her dark hair was twisted neatly into a bun, not a strand out of place, and her tailored gray dress hugged her form with clinical precision. When she smiled, it was small and practiced, the kind of smile meant to calm an audience rather than a heart. "Mother," she said softly, her voice as smooth as silk on glass, "you forgot to take your pills again." Evelyn blinked, startled, then looked up. "Oh, I must have." Her voice quivered like a candle in wind. "Was William in the kitchen just now? I thought I heard him humming." Melissa knelt, feigning sympathy. "No, darling. William's been gone for years. You're just tired." She brushed a wisp of hair from Evelyn's cheek, her hand gentle but her eyes elsewhere. "Here, drink your tea. I'll bring you something warmer soon." From across the room, a faint clatter broke the stillness. David Hartman, 41, entered with a stack of mail in his hands. His shoulders were stooped, his winter jacket still dusted with snow. He had the look of a man who had learned to live quietly in someone else's shadow. In this case, both his father's and his wife's. His once strong hands, rough from years at the lumberyard, now trembled when he spoke to his mother. "Evenin', Ma. You warm enough?" She smiled weakly. "You look just like your father when he came in from the woods." David tried to return the smile, but Melissa's glance cut him short, sharp, invisible. He cleared his throat. I brought the mail, some more letters from the bank." Melissa stood, straightening her dress. "I'll take those." She plucked the envelopes from his hand before he could object and slipped them under the stack of legal papers on the table. "You know how confusing this can be for her." David hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, just thought she might like to see something with her name on it." "She's seen enough names," Melissa replied coolly. Outside, the wind groaned against the walls, a low, hollow moan like something old remembering pain. The fireplace hissed as a log collapsed into embers. Evelyn watched the sparks rise and whispered to herself, "William used to say the fire keeps the ghosts away." Melissa turned her gaze toward the window. Beyond the frost-laced glass, the first real flakes of the coming blizzard drifted like feathers. She moved closer, her reflection merging with the night outside. "They said on the news this will be the biggest storm in 10 years, she murmured. "Strange, isn't it? How easily the world can bury things." David looked up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," she said lightly. "Just weather." The word lingered, brittle and unconvincing. Across town, the headlights of a patrol truck sliced through the swirling snow. Deputy Aaron Cole, 33, kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting near the radio. He had the face of a man who'd seen too much too young, hard edges softened by fatigue, dark stubble framing a jaw that clenched more often than it smiled. His eyes, gray like tarnished steel, flicked between the road and the storm, as if measuring which was the greater threat. Beside him sat Shadow, a large German shepherd whose black and tan coat gleamed even in the dim light. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, the rattle of branches, the whistle of wind, the whisper of snow brushing metal. Shadow's gaze was alert, intelligent, but calm, the calm of a creature who had already faced fear and survived it. Aaron reached over and scratched the dog's neck. "You hear that, buddy? Blizzard warning till morning. Guess it's just us out here again." Shadow gave a low rumble of acknowledgement, his breath fogging the window. 2 years earlier, Aaron had found him half-starved and bleeding, caught in an illegal snare near the outskirts of town. The dog's leg had been mangled, his eyes wild with distrust. But when Aaron knelt and spoke softly, "Easy, boy, you're safe now," something shifted in that gaze. Since then, they had been inseparable. Together, they'd pulled survivors from river ice, tracked missing children through mountain fog, and once found a lost hiker, half buried beneath an avalanche. Each mission had left its mark, but none more than the war Aaron still carried inside him, the one no one saw. He turned up the radio. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the static. "All units, be advised, visibility dropping in Frost Hollow. Recommend all patrols return to base before 0 hour." Aaron glanced at the clock, 8:47 p.m. "Copy that. Dispatch," he said, then added under his breath, "We'll finish one more loop." He eased the truck forward. The tires crunched through drifts that had begun to swallow the road. Shadow shifted closer, his head resting against Aaron's arm. Together, they moved through the storm like two ghosts unwilling to give up the living world. Back at the Hartman estate, the night had deepened into something heavier. Evelyn sat alone now, the television murmuring to no one in particular. On the screen, a weatherman pointed to swirling white bands sweeping across a map. "The blizzard will hit full force by midnight," he said cheerfully. "So bundle up, folks." Melissa reappeared with a folder tucked under her arm. "Mother," she said gently, "we need to sign a few more papers. It's for the trust, to make sure your medical care is secure." Evelyn frowned faintly. "Didn't we already do that last week?" "We just need to confirm it," Melissa replied smoothly, flipping to the last page. "Here, just sign where I've marked." The pen felt heavy in Evelyn's fingers. She hesitated, looking up. "You're such a good girl," she whispered, "always taking care of me." Melissa smiled, that same soft curve of lips that never reached her eyes. "That's what family's for." She watched as the pen scrawled a shaky signature, then took the paper gently, folding it with the care one might give to something sacred. When she looked up again, her expression was unreadable. David entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "Hey, it's getting bad out there. Maybe we should make sure the generator's full. Power's been flickering." "I'll handle it," Melissa said quickly. "You just stay with your mother." He hesitated. "You sure? It's freezing." Her look silenced him. "I said I'll handle it." Evelyn watched their exchange, confused by the tension she could no longer name. "Don't fight," she murmured. "William hated when we fought during storms." Melissa turned, forcing a laugh. "Of course not, Mother. Just a little miscommunication." She placed the signed documents back into the folder and slipped it beneath her coat. "I'll check the generator now." When she stepped outside, the wind bit at her face, sharp as guilt. The snow swirled upward, erasing her footprints, almost as soon as they were made. From inside the house, faint music began to play, an old waltz Evelyn used to dance to. The sound followed Melissa down the path, like a memory she wished would die. She stopped at the edge of the porch, looked toward the woods stretching endlessly into darkness, and whispered, Con bon nai, se chon vui moi tu. The door closed behind her with a final, hollow click. By nightfall, the storm had deepened into a white curtain, swallowing the shape of the valley. The roads that wound through Willow Creek became pale veins of light dusted with snow, and the forest of Frost Hollow, dense, ancient, and whispering, waited in silence. Melissa Hartman's SUV glided along the winding road, its headlights slicing through the flurries like twin blades. Inside the car, the heater hummed, and the faint smell of lavender perfume clung to the air, masking the metallic scent of cold metal and deception. In the passenger seat, Evelyn sat bundled in a wool blanket, her frail hands resting on her lap. Her face, pale as the snow beyond the window, twitched at every curve of the road. Melissa, she murmured, her voice tremulous, are we going to the doctor again? Melissa kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Her manicured hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, nails glinting under the dashboard light. No, Mother, she said gently, forcing her voice into a tone of honey. We're just going for a drive. You've been cooped up too long. Some fresh air will do you good. Evelyn nodded absently, eyes reflecting the storm outside. William used to take me out like this, always before a storm. Melissa's lips tightened. I know, she replied softly. He loved the woods, didn't he? The old woman smiled faintly, lost in the fog of her fading memory. Yes, he did. He said the trees remember prayers. Melissa didn't answer. The snow thickened. The road narrowed into the forest's throat, the trees bending overhead like mourners. The windshield wipers groaned under the weight of ice. A flash of headlights passed behind them, another car turning away toward safety, while Melissa drove deeper into the storm. She had chosen this night carefully. The radio had said the storm would reach its peak by midnight, and Frost Hollow was the one place people avoided when the weather turned. Locals said compasses spun there, that voices whispered through the pines. Melissa didn't believe in ghosts, but she did believe in silence. Is David coming too? Evelyn asked suddenly. He hates when I go out without him. Melissa forced a smile. He's resting, Mother. You and I just need some time alone. The old woman nodded again, her eyelids fluttering. The motion of the car lulled her, the sound of the heater blending with the storm's rhythm. But beneath her half-sleep, a faint unease stirred, like a string pulled taut in her chest. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't name it. At last, the SUV slowed to a crawl. The road ended where the forest thickened, and the snow lay unbroken. Melissa turned off the engine. The sudden silence was suffocating, broken only by the wind clawing at the windows. Evelyn blinked. Why are we stopping here? Melissa turned to her, her expression soft, almost tender. We're here, Mother. Isn't it peaceful? The old woman peered through the glass. All she saw was darkness. It's cold, she whispered. I'll help you out, Melissa said, already stepping into the storm. The wind bit at her face, ripping strands of hair loose from her bun. She moved around the car, opened the passenger door, and smiled. Come, Mother, just for a minute. Evelyn hesitated. It's snowing too much. Melissa reached in, taking her by the arms with deceptive gentleness. It'll only be a moment. She led the trembling woman out into the snow. The flakes clung to Evelyn's white hair, glittering like shards of light. Her boots sank deep into the powder, and every breath came out as fog. It's beautiful, she murmured. Just like it was when I was a girl. Melissa nodded, her breath sharp and quick. Yes, just like then. They walked only a few yards before Melissa stopped beside a tall pine whose trunk split into two at the base. The wind howled through the branches, a hollow moan. Melissa reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a coil of rope, thick, frayed, but strong. Evelyn's brow furrowed. What's that for? Melissa didn't answer. She worked quickly, her gloved hands steady. I need you to hold still for me, Mother, she said, her tone clipped, mechanical. You're shaking too much. Evelyn's confusion turned to fear. Melissa, you're scaring me. It's all right. Melissa's voice trembled for the first time. It'll be over soon. You won't feel the cold for long. The rope looped around Evelyn's wrists, pulling tight. She gasped, tried to pull away, but Melissa forced her back against the tree. Stop struggling, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? All these years holding on to what should have been ours. You signed everything away, Mother. Everything that could have saved us. Tears stung Evelyn's eyes. I don't understand. Saved who? Me, Melissa snapped. You'll understand soon enough. She took the papers from her coat, deeds, banknotes, signatures, and tucked them into a waterproof folder. Evelyn wept quietly, snow collecting on her lashes. Please, she whispered, don't leave me here. Melissa paused. For a second her face softened, then hardened again. I wish I could be the kind of person who cared, she said, but caring doesn't pay debts. She slipped off Evelyn's heavy coat, ignoring the old woman's cries, and stepped back. Goodbye, Mother, Evelyn called out after her, her voice barely audible through the storm. Melissa, please. My heart. But Melissa was already walking toward the car, her coat whipping in the wind. She didn't look back as she started the engine and drove away. For a moment, the headlights illuminated the scene, the old woman tied to the pine, her thin frame trembling, her eyes wide and lost. Then the light vanished, leaving only snow. Hours passed. The storm roared like a living thing, wrapping the forest in its icy jaws. Evelyn's fingers went numb. She tried to call out, but her voice broke apart in the wind. Images fluttered through her mind, the smell of sawdust from her husband's mill, David's laughter as a boy, William's voice calling her name through the trees. At some point, she began to imagine she could see him, her husband, standing just beyond the snow's veil. He wore the same plaid jacket he'd died in, the same gentle smile. William, she whispered, you came. The figure beckoned her softly. Don't sleep, Eve, he said, his voice calm, carried by the storm. Someone's coming. Across town, Deputy Aaron Cole squinted through the windshield, his wipers barely keeping up. The radio crackled again. Unit 3, report status. Still on Frost Hollow Road, he answered. Visibility's down to 50 feet. Copy that, came the reply. Be advised, reports of an abandoned vehicle near mile marker 6. Could be nothing, but check it out. Aaron frowned. Roger that. Heading there now. Beside him, shadows stirred, ears pricking. The dog's amber eyes reflected the faint dashboard glow. You feel that too, huh? Aaron muttered. Something's not right. They drove until the headlights caught the glint of chrome through the falling snow. A black SUV half buried in the drift, engine still faintly ticking. Aaron parked behind it and stepped out into the storm. The cold slammed into him like a wall. Hello? He called, but the wind devoured his voice. No answer. He approached the car. The driver's door was ajar. No footprints led away, just snow filling what might have been tracks. He bent to examine the tire tread, noting how they veered slightly off-road before stopping altogether. Dispatch, he said into the radio. Vehicle located. No occupants. I'm going to check the surrounding area. Shadow jumped from the truck, paws sinking deep. His body stiffened, tail low, nose pressed to the wind. Then, without warning, he barked sharply, a sound of alarm and certainty. Aaron followed the direction of his gaze. Beyond the tree line, the forest loomed darker than the sky. The deputy adjusted his flashlight, the beam barely slicing through the snow. Lead the way, Shadow, he murmured. They stepped off the road and into the storm's heart. Back in the woods, Evelyn's vision dimmed to flickers of gray and white. Her breath came shallow, frost blooming on her lashes. The voice of her husband echoed again, closer now. Don't sleep, Eve. Help is near. The snow howled louder, but through it came another sound, the faint rhythmic bark of a dog, closer and closer, defying the wind itself. Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest smile as her eyes fluttered closed. William, she whispered, you kept your promise. The storm had become a living thing, howling, breathing, swallowing sound and sight. Snow fell so thick that Aaron Cole could barely see beyond the hood of his patrol truck. The world had turned into a whirl of white and gray, a shifting dreamscape where direction and distance no longer meant anything. The headlights carved out only a few feet of light, and beyond that, darkness reigned. The radio hissed static. Shadow sat alert in the passenger seat, his body tense, ears flicking toward the forest that loomed on both sides of the road. His breath fogged the window in short, steady bursts. Aaron gripped the wheel tighter, his gloved knuckles pale against the leather. "If anyone's out here tonight," he muttered, "they don't want to be found, or they need a miracle." His voice was swallowed instantly by the storm. They drove another 100 yards before Shadow suddenly rose, pressing his nose to the glass. He gave a low growl that vibrated in his chest. Aaron slowed the truck. "What is it, boy?" The dog turned toward the left, toward the dark mass of trees bending under the snow. Then, with a sharp bark, Shadow lunged at the door, scratching to get out. Aaron opened it, and the dog bounded into the night. "Shadow!" he shouted, grabbing his flashlight. The beam cut through the swirling flakes just enough to reveal paw prints heading off the road. Aaron followed, boots sinking deep, his breath rasping in the freezing air. The cold bit through his jacket like teeth. For a moment, all he heard was wind. Then came another sound, so faint he thought he imagined it. A whimper, human and fragile. Shadow barked again, louder this time. Aaron pushed forward, using one arm to shield his face. The forest seemed to close around him, branches heavy with ice, whispering in the gale. And then the light found it, a glint of silver beneath the snow. Aaron crouched. The beam of his flashlight revealed a frail arm half buried, the hand stiff and blue, and around the wrist, a tarnished silver watch. The second hand had frozen at 8:23. His heart lurched. He scraped away the snow and gasped. There she was, an elderly woman bound to a pine with rope, her body trembling violently against the cold. Her face was ghostly, lips pale, eyes half open but unfocused. The snow had begun to bury her, turning her into part of the landscape. "Jesus!" Aaron whispered, dropping to his knees. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes flickered, but no sound came. Shadow was already working, teeth gnawing at the frozen rope. His muzzle bled from the strain, but he didn't stop until the last strand snapped. Then he pressed close against the woman's side, curling to share his body heat. Aaron tore off his coat and wrapped it around her shaking shoulders. "Stay with me," he urged. "You're not dying here, not tonight." He fumbled for the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3. I've got a live victim, elderly female, severe hypothermia, requesting medevac immediately." Static. The storm swallowed the signal whole. "Damn it," he muttered. He lifted the woman carefully, her frail weight like a handful of feathers, and began staggering back through the snow. Each step was agony, the wind tearing at him, the drifts rising to his knees. Shadow circled him, barking encouragement, guiding him toward the faint red glow of the patrol lights. By the time he reached the truck, Aaron's arms were numb, his lungs screaming. He laid the woman across the seat, blasting the heater to full. "Hang in there," he whispered. "You made it this far." Her eyes fluttered open for a second, pale and glassy. "William," she murmured. "Is that you?" Aaron froze. "No, ma'am," he said softly. "My name's Aaron. You're safe now." She tried to smile, then drifted back into unconsciousness. He took off his gloves, rubbed her hands between his, trying to coax warmth into her paper-thin skin. Shadow rested his head on her lap, whining softly, his body trembling not from cold, but from worry. Aaron watched the old woman's shallow breathing and whispered, "Don't you dare die on me. Not after he found you." Back at the Hartman house, the same storm battered against the tall windows, though the inside remained warm and glowing. Melissa sat at the kitchen table, phone pressed to her ear, her voice measured and trembling in a perfect performance. "Yes, officer. My mother-in-law. She's gone. I think she wandered off. She has dementia, you see. We just noticed she's missing." Her eyes darted to the clock. It was past midnight. "Yes," she continued. "We've looked everywhere. Please, can you send someone?" A voice on the other end promised to dispatch a patrol when the roads cleared. Melissa hung up, exhaling shakily. Her reflection in the window looked pale and angelic, but her hands, trembling slightly, betrayed the rot beneath. Behind her, footsteps sounded. David entered, still in his work jacket. His hair was damp with melted snow. "You called the police?" "Yes," she replied without turning. "Your mother's missing." David frowned. Missing? What are you talking about? I thought you put her to bed. I went to check on her, Melissa said smoothly, her tone calm, rehearsed. Her coat was gone. The back door was open. I think she got confused and walked out. David blinked, processing her words. In this weather? Are you out of your mind? Melissa looked up then, feigning tears. Do you think I wanted this? She's sick, David. I've done everything I can to care for her while you bury yourself in that lumber yard. The accusation hit him like a slap. That's not fair, he said quietly. You know why I work those hours. Then where were you when she needed you? Melissa's voice cracked just enough to sound believable. David turned away, guilt washing over him. But as he leaned against the counter, something caught his eye. Her boots by the door, splattered with dried mud. Strange. The driveway was paved and clean before the storm. He frowned. Where'd the mud come from? Melissa blinked. What? Your boots, he said slowly. You were out tonight? Her pause was just a second too long. I took the trash to the curb, she said, recovering. It's not a crime to help around the house. David didn't respond, but the seed of suspicion lodged itself deep. He left the room, heading for the garage. The motion light flickered on. The cold air smelled of oil and metal. As he reached for a tarp, something small glinted on the concrete. A gold ring, his mother's wedding band. He bent down, heart pounding, and picked it up. The inside was engraved, E. Pulds, W. Always. He closed his eyes, whispering, What have you done? Back in Frost Hollow, Aaron pushed the truck to its limit. The heater roared. The tires fought the drifts. Come on, stay with me, he muttered, glancing at the woman slumped beside him. Her pulse was faint, but steady. Shadow sat in the back, whining, restless. The dog's fur was soaked, clumped with ice, yet his gaze never left Evelyn's face. The radio sputtered. Finally, a voice broke through. Unit 3, copy! Aaron seized the mic. I've got a victim, alive, critical condition. Need medical assistance at Frost Hollow exit. ETA 15 minutes. Copy that. Ambulance en route. Relief flooded him. He glanced at Shadow. We did it, buddy. As they neared town, the storm began to thin. The outlines of buildings emerged through the snow, ghostly and pale. Aaron pulled into the small parking lot of Willow Creek General Hospital, where a team in heavy coats waited, pushing a gurney through the snow. She's hypothermic, he shouted as they lifted her out. No ID on her, but she's been out there for hours. The nurses worked quickly, wrapping Evelyn in heated blankets, fitting an oxygen mask. Aaron followed them inside, adrenaline fading to exhaustion. Under the fluorescent lights, the world felt too bright, too clean after the storm. A nurse named Hannah Brooks, mid-30s, kind-faced and steady, touched his arm. She had short auburn hair tucked under her cap, and eyes that carried years of seeing both birth and death without ever losing empathy. You saved her life, she said softly. If you'd been 5 minutes later. Aaron nodded, staring through the glass window at the frail figure on the bed. It wasn't me, he said. It was the dog. Shadow, lying at his feet, thumped his tail once, eyes half closed. As the machines beeped steadily, Evelyn's hand twitched under the blanket. Her eyes opened, cloudy, uncertain, and found Aaron. For a heartbeat, she seemed to look past him, as if she saw someone else. William? She whispered. Aaron leaned closer. No, ma'am, you're safe now. My name's Aaron. Her gaze softened. Her hand, trembling, reached out. He took it gently. Thank you, she breathed, her voice fragile as snow. God sent you, and the dog. Her eyes closed again, this time not in death, but in rest. Aaron stood there for a long while, the storm's echo fading behind the hospital walls. Outside, dawn began to break, faint, uncertain light glimmering on the snow. The snow had stopped by morning, leaving Willow Creek coated in a fragile silence. The world looked pure again. White rooftops, silver branches, and the pale sun struggling to break through clouds. But inside Willow Creek General Hospital, purity was a lie. Beneath the soft beeping of machines and the murmur of nurses, a truth waited, buried under layers of fear and guilt, like something trapped beneath ice, waiting to be unearthed. Deputy Aaron Cole sat in the corridor, elbows on his knees, rubbing his hands together for warmth that never seemed to come. He hadn't slept. Shadow dozed at his feet, head on his paws, his ears flicking at every sound. The German shepherd looked as exhausted as his handler, but his eyes, amber and unyielding, stayed fixed on the hospital door where Evelyn Hartman lay. Inside, Evelyn's breaths came slow but steady. The white of her hospital gown blended with the sheets, her skin nearly translucent in the cold light. On the bedside table, someone had placed the silver watch Aaron had found in the snow. Its hands had been cleaned, but were still frozen at 8:23. Nurse Hannah Brooks checked her vitals, her expression soft but focused. Hannah had been a nurse for 12 years, the kind of woman whose strength came not from size. She was small, compact, with calm gray eyes, but from endurance. Her voice could quiet panic. Her hands, calloused but gentle, had guided too many souls between pain and peace. She adjusted the IV line, then turned as Aaron entered quietly. "She's stable," Hannah said, keeping her tone low. "But her mind drifts in and out. She keeps repeating something about a box." Aaron frowned. "A box?" Hannah nodded. "A wooden box, under the floor, she says. Keeps whispering it over and over, like she's afraid someone will take it." Aaron exhaled slowly. "Where exactly?" "She didn't say," Hannah replied. "Just the wooden box under the bedroom floor." He looked toward the window. The storm had cleared, but its aftermath still lingered in the stillness. "Maybe she's trying to tell us something," he said. Hannah's gaze softened. "She's been through hell. Sometimes the mind clings to fragments when the heart needs to confess." Aaron nodded. "Or warn us." He turned toward the hallway. "I'll talk to her son." David Hartman arrived an hour later, his face pale and drawn. The night had aged him. He hadn't shaved, and his blue work shirt was still smudged with sawdust from the lumber mill. He looked like a man who'd been walking through fog and only now realized he might never find his way back. When Aaron met him outside the hospital room, David's first words were hoarse. "How is she?" "She's weak," Aaron replied. "But she's alive. You should know. She's been saying something about a wooden box under the floor." David blinked. "A box?" Aaron nodded. "Any idea what that means?" David rubbed the back of his neck, thinking. "She used to hide things like that. Sentimental stuff, letters, keepsakes, deeds from the mill. My father trusted paper more than people." Aaron's tone grew sharper. "Would she have kept financial records, property documents?" David hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Maybe. Why?" "Because whatever happened out there wasn't an accident," Aaron said quietly. "And I think that box might explain why." The Hartman estate stood silent beneath the snow, its roof heavy with ice, the once proud pines around it drooping like sentinels of grief. Aaron, David, and 2 local detectives arrived mid-morning. The house smelled faintly of cedar and expensive polish, but something underneath, the faint trace of perfume and deceit, still lingered. Melissa was gone. Aaron scanned the room. Her coat was missing, her purse too. He checked the drawers, empty jewelry case, scattered papers. The fireplace was cold but freshly cleaned. Someone had burned something the night before. "Looks like she left in a hurry," Detective Monroe muttered. Monroe was in his 50s, tall and broad, with a mustache and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. "You think she knew we'd come?" Aaron crouched near the hearth. "Maybe, but she didn't clean up everything." He held up a half-melted fragment of paper. The faint edge of a signature, Evelyn Hartman, was still visible. David's stomach twisted. "Oh, God!" They moved upstairs to Evelyn's bedroom. It was neat, untouched. A Bible rested on the nightstand, open to Psalms 27. The floral wallpaper looked old and faded, the kind of pattern chosen decades earlier by a woman who'd once cared about beauty. Aaron knelt, tapping the wooden floorboards with the butt of his flashlight. "She said under the floor," he murmured. "We start here?" Monroe retrieved a crowbar. After a few tense minutes, the boards gave way with a dull crack. Beneath the dust and cobwebs lay a small wooden chest, hand-carved, its hinges worn with age. David recognized it instantly. "My father made that box," he whispered. "He used to say, 'Every truth deserves a keeper.'" Aaron carefully lifted it out and set it on the bed. The latch was simple, but rusted. With one firm push, it opened. Inside lay a stack of old deeds, birth certificates, and one small USB drive tucked into an envelope. On the envelope, written in Evelyn's shaky handwriting, were the words, "If anything happens to me, show this to David." David's hands trembled as he inserted the USB into the detective's laptop. The file opened with a flicker, a time-stamped video from 2 weeks earlier. Melissa stood in the living room, elegant in her cream blouse, smiling sweetly as Evelyn sat on the sofa, pen in hand. "Just sign here, Mother," Melissa's voice purred. "It's for the insurance company. You don't want David to worry about taxes, do you?" Evelyn looked hesitant. "I don't remember this part." Melissa leaned closer, her tone hardening just enough for the microphone to catch. "You don't need to. Just sign." The camera angle shifted slightly, revealing a hidden reflection in a glass cabinet. Melissa's hand holding Evelyn's wrist, forcing the signature. David's breath caught. She made her sign everything. Aaron closed the laptop slowly. "That's your proof." David's voice broke. "Proof of her crime, and my failure." Monroe picked up his radio. "All units, put out an APB, suspect Melissa Hartman, female, early 30s, 5'7", blonde, traveling alone. Possible route toward Burlington or Rutland." Aaron turned to David, his tone gentler now. "You didn't fail her. You're the reason we found this." David shook his head, tears streaking his face. "No, my mother hid this box because she knew I wouldn't believe her, because I didn't protect her." Aaron placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're protecting her now." By sunset, word came through the dispatch radio. Melissa Hartman had been located at the Burlington bus terminal, suitcase in hand, ticket to New York. She didn't resist when officers approached. They said she simply sat down, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Guess she remembered after all." That night, the snow outside the hospital glowed under streetlights, soft as candlelight. Inside, Evelyn stirred. The machines hummed gently as she opened her eyes. David was there beside her, his hand clutching hers. "Mom," he whispered, "we found it. The box. Everything." Her eyes glistened, not from pride, but from sorrow. "You shouldn't have had to," she murmured. "I wanted to spare you." David's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I let her—" "Don't," Evelyn interrupted softly, her fingers weak but firm on his. "Don't hate her, David. Greed. Greed is a sickness worse than mine. It takes memory from the soul." He bent his head, weeping quietly. Through the window, Aaron watched in silence. Shadow lay at his feet, eyes half closed but alert, guarding the room as though it were sacred ground. The light from the snow outside reflected in the dog's gaze, glowing like two small stars, symbols of loyalty, of grace undeserved yet freely given. Inside, Evelyn's eyes found Shadow's silhouette through the doorway. Her lips trembled into a faint smile. "I thought I'd been forgotten," she whispered weakly. "But you remembered me." Shadow raised his head, tail thumping once, soft, steady, like a heartbeat in the quiet night. Winter returned to Willow Creek softer than before. The storms came gentler now, the wind whispering rather than howling, as though the land itself had exhaled the grief it once held. Snow rested on the rooftops like a quiet benediction, and the frozen lake shimmered beneath the pale sun, a mirror of everything that had survived. It had been 1 year since the night Frost Hollow nearly claimed a life, and instead delivered a miracle. In the town square, the people of Willow Creek gathered, bundled in scarves and heavy coats. The smell of pine and roasted chestnuts drifted through the air, mingling with laughter and the crunch of boots on snow. A new bronze plaque gleamed on the courthouse steps, freshly unveiled beneath the flagpole. The inscription read, "In honor of courage, loyalty, and mercy, the night the storm was broken." And below that, Shadow's light foundation. David Hartman stood beside the plaque, his hands folded in front of him, eyes misted with quiet humility. He had aged a little in that year. Lines deepened at the corners of his eyes, not from sorrow, but from the weight of understanding. The tragedy had not hardened him. It had carved something gentler, more deliberate. He wore a dark wool coat and a simple blue scarf, a color his mother had always said brought out the kindness in his eyes. When his turn came to speak, David cleared his throat, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "This foundation," he began, "wasn't built on charity. It was built on remembrance. My mother taught me that mercy doesn't erase pain, but it redeems it. And a dog named Shadow reminded me that love doesn't always come from the hands of people, but sometimes from the paws that stand beside them when no one else will. He paused, looking toward the edge of the crowd. Aaron Cole stood there in his dress uniform, tall and still, the gold of his deputy's badge glinting in the sunlight. At his feet sat Shadow, now a year older, muzzle dusted with white, but still with the same alert, steadfast gaze. When the applause began, Shadow wagged his tail once, then sat perfectly still, as if he understood the solemnity of it all. After the ceremony, Aaron was approached by Mayor Linda Carver, a woman in her early 60s with a sharp intelligence softened by compassion. Her gray hair was cut short, and she carried herself with the ease of someone who had weathered both politics and people. "Deputy Cole," she said warmly, pinning a small medal to his chest, "for bravery and service beyond duty." Aaron shifted uncomfortably, the crowd's eyes heavy on him. "Thank you, ma'am," he said simply, "but I'm not a hero." He glanced down at Shadow, who tilted his head up at him. "I just followed the footprints of one." Laughter rippled through the audience, followed by applause. The mayor smiled. "Then I hope we have more heroes with paws in this town." Aaron knelt and scratched behind Shadow's ear. "Guess we'll both have to live up to it, huh?" Later that afternoon, the snow began to fall again, slow and delicate. Aaron drove out toward the edge of town, to a place where the trees stood older, wiser, the Willow Glen Care Home, a modest nursing facility surrounded by birches and evergreens. It was peaceful there, the kind of peace that comes from healing rather than forgetting. Inside, sunlight spilled through large bay windows, turning the hardwood floors golden. A faint smell of chamomile and cedar filled the air. Residents sat reading, knitting, or dozing in rocking chairs, each lost in their own quiet world. Evelyn Hartman sat by the window in her wheelchair, wrapped in a cream-colored shawl. Her hair had turned almost silver white, soft as snowlight. Though her memory still drifted like mist over water, there was a gentleness to her now, a surrender, not to loss, but to grace. She watched the falling snow as though it were a language she almost remembered. When she heard the soft click of claws on the floor, she smiled before she turned. "I know that sound," she whispered. Shadow trotted into the room, his tail sweeping the floor. Aaron followed behind, holding a small bouquet of winter roses. Evelyn's eyes lit up. "There you are," she said, reaching out with trembling hands. "My brave boy." Shadow rested his head on her lap, eyes half closing in contentment. Aaron smiled, setting the flowers in a vase by the window. "He still remembers the way here," he said softly. Evelyn stroked the dog's fur. "Of course he does," she murmured. "Dogs never forget the way home." Aaron pulled a chair close and sat beside her. "David told me to say thank you," he said. "The foundation's already helped 5 families this winter, and 3 rescue dogs found new homes." Evelyn's eyes glistened. "He always had his father's heart," she said faintly. "He just needed to remember where it was." They sat in silence for a while, watching the snow. Then Evelyn spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Shadow. You were left once, weren't you?" Aaron nodded quietly. "Yeah, I found him chained behind a gas station 5 years ago. He was skin and bones, but he wouldn't stop barking. That's how I noticed him. The vet said he wouldn't survive the night, but he did. Guess he had more fight in him than most." Evelyn smiled softly. "You both did." She looked down at Shadow, her frail fingers brushing the fur between his ears. "You were abandoned once, like me," she whispered. "But you didn't stay in the dark. You came back for someone else." Shadow's tail thumped once, then again, as if answering. From across the room, a young caretaker named Elena Ruiz watched quietly. She was in her late 20s, with olive skin and a kind, open face framed by dark curls. Elena had come to Willow Glen from New Mexico after her mother's death, searching for purpose in caring for others. She often said that watching people find peace reminded her that healing wasn't about fixing, it was about staying. She walked over now, smiling gently. "Mrs. Hartman, it's almost time for your tea." Evelyn turned her gaze to her. "Just a few more minutes, dear. We're remembering?" Elena nodded, glancing at Aaron. "She talks about that night often," she said softly. About the storm, the light, the dog who found her. Some of the others think it's just her dementia replaying, but her eyes glimmered. I think she just wants to remind herself that mercy exists. Aaron looked at Evelyn, then back at Elena. Maybe we all need that reminder sometimes. Outside, twilight painted the snow in soft gold and lavender hues. Evelyn sat with her blanket tucked under her chin, Shadow's head still on her lap. The glass reflected their shapes, an old woman and a dog, framed by a window that seemed to hold both the past and the present. William used to say winter was God's way of making the world start over, she whispered. I never believed him, until now. Aaron stood near the doorway, his breath misting in the cold air. Maybe he was right, he said. Evelyn looked down at Shadow again. You saved me from the dark, she said tenderly. And you didn't even know who I was. Her voice broke into a whisper. You just knew someone needed you. Shadow blinked, his gaze fixed on hers. Outside, the snow fell slower now, each flake glinting in the pale sunrise that began to crest the hills. Aaron glanced toward the horizon. It's going to be a clear morning, he murmured. First one in a long time. Evelyn smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time for the world to wake up. The camera of the world, if such a thing could exist, would have pulled back slowly then, through the window, over the glistening birch trees. Evelyn's figure became smaller, her shawl blending with the snow. Shadow sat perfectly still beside her, his fur haloed by the morning light. As the first rays of the sun touched the frozen earth, Shadow lifted his head toward it, his breath rising like a prayer. And for one fleeting moment, it seemed the winter itself had learned mercy. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or angels in white. Sometimes they come quietly, through a loyal dog, a moment of mercy, or the courage to forgive when the heart has every reason not to. In the frozen silence of that winter, God didn't move mountains. He simply guided one German shepherd to the place where grace was needed most. And maybe that's how he still works today. Not with noise, but with love that finds us in the cold. If you believe that kindness can still change the world, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your story, your faith, your light, they all matter. And if this story touched your heart, please like the video, follow for more stories of hope, and subscribe to our channel, because sometimes the smallest act of mercy can become someone else's miracle.